Have you ever looked at the person sleeping next to you, the person whose breath you've timed your own to for 10 years, and realized you're looking at a stranger? They say love is blind, but I think love is actually a master of disguise. It paints over the cracks. It turns red flags into festive banners. My name is Sarah, and for a decade, I believed I was living the ultimate success story. I had the handsome, high-flying husband, the beautiful suburban home, and a marriage that our friends used to call the gold standard. Mark was a fixer. That's what he did for a living. He was a high-level corporate consultant who stepped into failing companies and turned them around. He was charismatic, sharp, and had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room when he spoke to you. When he looked at me, I felt invincible. But looking back, the signs were always there. They were small, like whispers in a crowded room. A late-night phone call was taken in the garage. A sudden change in his password. A work trip to a city where his company didn't even have an office. I ignored them all because I wanted to believe in the dream. I wanted to believe that the man who brought me coffee every morning and remembered my mother's birthday was the man I thought he was. Our 10th anniversary was supposed to be the pinnacle of that dream. Mark had planned a massive party at our estate. He told me to buy the most expensive dress I could find. Nothing is too good for the woman who built this life with me, he said. He kissed my forehead, and for a moment, the cold chill that had been growing in my chest for months finally thawed. But that night, the illusion didn't just crack. It shattered into a million jagged pieces. It started with a simple mistake. Mark had left his personal tablet on the kitchen island while he went to greet the caterers. Usually, his devices were locked tighter than a bank vault. But he was distracted. He was rushing. And a notification popped up on the screen. It wasn't a work email. It wasn't a news alert. It was a photo of a child. A little boy, maybe 5 years old, is standing in front of a birthday cake. And the caption read, "Daddy, we missed you today. Hope the work meeting is over soon." My heart stopped. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. I just stared at that screen until it went dark. Daddy? Mark and I didn't have children. We had tried, years ago, but it hadn't happened for us. He told me he was okay with it. He told me that just the two of us was enough. I felt a wave of nausea so intense I had to grip the counter to keep from falling. I reached out, my fingers trembling, and tapped the screen. It was still unlocked. I shouldn't have looked. Part of me, the part of me that wanted to stay in the golden cage, begged me to put the tablet down and walk away. But the other part, the part that had been suspicious for years, took over. I opened the messaging app. And there, buried under a contact name that was just a single period, was a life I never knew existed. There were hundreds of messages. Photos of a house in a city only 2 hours away. Photos of holidays, school plays, and quiet Sunday mornings. Mark wasn't just having an affair. He had an entire family. For 5 years, while I was supporting him, helping him build his career, sitting home alone waiting for him to return from business trips, he was playing house with another woman and a son I never knew he had. The sound of his footsteps coming down the hall sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through my veins. I locked the screen, slid the tablet back to its exact position, and turned to the sink, splashing cold water on my face. "Sarah? Honey, the florist is here. They need to know where the centerpieces go," Mark said, his voice as smooth and comforting as ever. I looked at him in the mirror. I saw the expensive suit, the perfectly styled hair, and the warm smile. But for the first time, I didn't see my husband. I saw a monster, a man who could look me in the eye and lie for half a decade without blinking. "I'll be right there, Mark," I said. My voice was steady, which surprised even me. The game had changed. The betrayal was so deep, so profound, that screaming wouldn't be enough. Crying wouldn't be enough. He hadn't just broken my heart, he had stolen years of my life. He had built his perfect existence on the foundation of my trust, using my family's money and my emotional labor to fund a secret world. As I walked past him to go to the garden, he reached out and squeezed my hand. I didn't flinch. I didn't pull away. I let him touch me, but inside, I was already gone. I was no longer the loving wife. I was a hunter. And I wasn't going to just leave him. I was going to dismantle his life piece by piece, just like he had dismantled mine. The party was a blur of expensive champagne and fake smiles. I played the role of the devoted wife to perfection. I moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations on 10 years of bliss, while every cell in my body wanted to scream. I watched Mark work the room, laughing with my father's business partners, charming the neighbors. It was a masterclass in deception. But the next morning, the real work began. I knew I couldn't confront him yet. If I did, he'd use his charm to gaslight me. He'd find a way to make me the crazy one. I needed evidence. I needed a paper trail so long and so clear that no amount of smooth talking could ever erase it. I waited until Mark left for his office on Monday morning. As soon as his car cleared the driveway, I went to his home office. It was always locked, but I knew where he kept the spare key, inside a hollowed-out book on the library shelf. He thought he was so clever, but I had spent 10 years learning his habits. I didn't start with his computer, I knew he'd have trackers on that. I started with the physical files. Mark was old-fashioned in one way, he kept paper records of his special projects. I found a locked filing cabinet hidden behind a faux panel in the closet. It took me 2 hours with a basic lock-picking kit I'd ordered online under a fake name, but when it finally clicked open, the air left the room. It wasn't just the other family. It was much, much worse. I found bank statements from offshore accounts I never knew existed. Accounts that were being funded by small, incremental transfers from my family's business. My father had trusted Mark to manage the company's expansion. Instead, Mark had been bleeding the company dry for years, funneling the money into a shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands. But then, I found the lease agreements. Mark had rented an apartment in the city under the name Marcus Thorne. He had a separate driver's license, a separate credit card, and even a separate social security number. He wasn't just Mark the consultant. He was Marcus the investor. As I dug deeper, I realized the woman in the photos wasn't just a mistress. Her name was Elena, and she was the daughter of one of my father's biggest competitors. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just a double life. This was a long-game corporate heist. Mark had married me to get close to my father's assets, and he was using Elena to bridge the gap into her father's empire as well. He was playing both sides, stealing from both families, and building a third life for himself that neither of us knew about. I sat on the floor of that dark office, surrounded by the evidence of my own destruction. I felt small. I felt foolish. How could I have been so blind? I had given this man everything. I had supported him when his first firm failed, or when he said it failed. I realize now that was probably a scam, too. But then, the sadness turned into something else. It was a cold, sharp feeling in the pit of my stomach. It was the feeling of a woman who had nothing left to lose because she had already lost everything she thought she had. I took out my phone and started scanning every single document. I didn't miss a page. The bank transfers, the fake IDs, the photos, the lease agreements. I uploaded them all to a secure cloud server that Mark couldn't access. As I was finishing, I heard the front door open. My heart hammered against my ribs. Mark was home early. "Sarah? You home?" he called out from the foyer. I scrambled to lock the cabinet and slide the panel back into place. I smoothed my hair, took a deep breath, and stepped out of the office, locking it behind me. "In here, honey." I called back, my voice remarkably calm. I met him in the hallway. He looked tired and stressed. He walked up to me and wrapped his arms around me, burying his face in my neck. "Long day," he muttered. "I'm so glad to be home with you. You're the only thing that keeps me sane, Sarah. A week ago, that would have made me melt. Now, it made my skin crawl. It was a performance. Everything about him was a performance. He was a hollow man, a collection of lies wrapped in an expensive suit. I'm glad you're home too, Mark, I said, patting his back. I was just thinking about our future. About how much we've built together. We've only just started, Sarah, he said, pulling back to look at me with those piercing blue eyes. Big things are coming. Huge things. I smiled at him. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. I know they are, Mark. I can feel it. That night, while he slept soundly beside me, I stayed awake. I wasn't crying anymore. I was planning. Mark thought he was the smartest person in the room. He thought he was a master chess player, and I was just a pawn on his board. What he didn't realize was that the pawn was about to reach the other side of the board. And when a pawn does that, it becomes the most powerful piece on the table. The next few weeks were a delicate dance. I had to keep up the charade of the loving, supportive wife while I conducted a full-scale investigation into the man I shared a bed with. I decided I couldn't do this alone. I needed someone who knew how to dig into the digital shadows, someone who wouldn't ask too many questions. I reached out to an old friend from college, Leo. He was a cybersecurity expert and had a reputation for being a gray hat hacker. He was the kind of person who could find a needle in a digital haystack and then tell you exactly who put it there. We met in a crowded coffee shop on the other side of town. I wore a hat and sunglasses, feeling like a character in a spy movie, but the stakes were all too real. I need you to look into these accounts, I told him, sliding a flash drive across the table. And I need to know everything about a woman named Elena Vance. Leo looked at the drive, then at me. Sarah, you look like you haven't slept in a month. What's going on? Just tell me what you find, Leo. Please. 2 days later, Leo called me from a burner phone. Sarah, you need to sit down. This guy, your husband, he's not just a cheater. He's a professional. Leo explained that Mark didn't really exist before about 12 years ago. He had wiped his previous identity clean. But more importantly, he found the link to Elena. Elena wasn't just a mistress, she was a victim. She believed Mark was a widower whose wife had died in a tragic car accident years ago. He had told her that he was an independent investor who was helping her father's company navigate a difficult merger, the same merger my father was involved in. He's playing them against each other, Sarah, Leo said. He's feeding your father's company secrets to Elena's father, and vice versa. He's making both companies lose value so he can swoop in through his shell corporation and buy them for pennies on the dollar. He's planning to bankrupt your family, Sarah. And Elena's, too. The sheer scale of the betrayal was breathtaking. He wasn't just ruining my life, he was destroying my father's legacy, the company my grandfather had started from nothing. And he was doing it with a smile on his face. When is he planning to pull the trigger? I asked. There's a massive shareholder meeting in 3 weeks, Leo replied. That's when the merger vote happens. If it goes through the way he's orchestrated it, your father loses everything. Mark becomes the majority shareholder of the new combined entity under his fake identity, Marcus Thorne. He'll be set for life, and you. You'll be left with a pile of debt and a husband who has mysteriously disappeared on a business trip. He's going to leave me, I whispered. He's already bought the plane tickets, Sarah. 2 tickets to Singapore. One for him, one for Elena and the kid. Date of departure, the morning after the shareholder meeting. I felt a coldness settle over me. It wasn't the coldness of fear, but the coldness of absolute certainty. Mark had planned every detail of my downfall. He had scheduled my heartbreak like a meeting in his calendar. Leo, I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. Can you get me access to the presentation files for that meeting? The ones on the main corporate server? It's risky, Sarah. I don't care. I need to be able to swap a file. Just one file. What are you going to do? I'm going to give Mark the audience he's always wanted, I said. I'm going to make sure that when he stands up to take everything from us, the whole world sees exactly who he is. For the next 2 weeks, I was the perfect wife. I cooked his favorite meals. I listened to him talk about how stressed he was with the upcoming merger. I even suggested we take a long vacation after the meeting was over. That sounds perfect, Sarah, he said, kissing my hand. We deserve it. We've worked so hard for this. I watched him as he spoke. I looked at the way his eyes crinkled when he lied. I looked at the hands that had held mine, the hands that were currently signing the documents that would ruin my family. I realized then that I didn't hate him. Hate is an emotion you feel for someone who matters. I felt nothing for him. He was a bug under a microscope. He was a problem to be solved. I spent my nights working with Leo. We built a digital bomb. It contained the bank statements, the fake IDs, photos of his second family, recordings of his private calls with Elena, and the proof of his embezzlement. We packaged it into a slick, professional-looking video, the kind Mark loved. The stage was set. The players were in their positions. All I had to do was wait for the curtain to rise. The week before the merger, Mark's behavior started to change. He became frantic, irritable. The pressure of maintaining 2 families and a massive corporate fraud was finally starting to show. He started gaslighting me more aggressively. If I asked a simple question about where he'd been, he'd turn it around on me. Why are you so insecure, Sarah? After 10 years, you don't trust me? This is exactly why I've been so stressed. I come home to an interrogation. He was trying to make me pull away. He wanted me to be the one to pick a fight so he could have an excuse to leave. He wanted to be the victim of a difficult wife. But I didn't give him the satisfaction. Every time he snapped, I responded with kindness. Every time he lied, I pretended to believe him. I was a mirror, reflecting exactly what he wanted to see. It was exhausting. It felt like I was holding my breath underwater, waiting for the surface. One evening, I purposely left my phone on the table and went to take a shower. I had set up a fake message from a lawyer about our prenuptial agreement. I knew he'd look. When I came back into the room, he was standing by the window, my phone in his hand. His face was pale. Who is this, Sarah? Why are you talking to a divorce lawyer? He demanded, trying to take the offensive. I didn't panic. I just sighed and sat on the edge of the bed. Mark. I've been feeling the distance between us. I was scared. I wanted to know where I stood if things didn't work out. I'm sorry. I should have talked to you. He saw the weakness and pounced. He spent the next hour forgiving me, telling me how hurt he was that I would doubt him, and then, crucially, he told me I should stay home for the shareholder meeting. It's going to be very tense, honey, a lot of angry investors. I don't want you caught up in that drama. Why don't you go to the spa for the day? Relax. When I come home, we'll celebrate the new company. He wanted me out of the way. He wanted to do the deed and disappear before I even knew what happened. You're right, Mark, I said, leaning my head on his shoulder. I'll go to the spa. I'll be waiting for you when you get back. The day before the meeting, I visited my father. He looked 10 years older than he was. He knew the company was in trouble, but he didn't know why. He still thought Mark was his savior. I'm worried, Sarah, he told me, his voice shaking. If this merger doesn't go through perfectly, we lose the house. We lose everything. Mark says he's got it under control, but Dad, I said, taking his hands. I need you to trust me. Tomorrow, no matter what happens, no matter what you see on that screen, just stay quiet. Don't say a word. I have a plan. He looked at me, confused. What are you talking about? Mark isn't who you think he is. But tomorrow, everyone is going to know the truth. Just hold on for one more day. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat in our living room, watching the sun come up over the garden I had spent years tending. I thought about the life I was about to destroy. It was a beautiful life, on the surface. But a house built on a foundation of rot can't stand. And I wasn't going to be the one crushed when it fell. I checked my email one last time. A message from Leo, the file is in the queue. It's set to autoplay as soon as the main presentation starts. They won't be able to stop it from the podium. Good luck, Sarah. You're a badass. I smiled. For the first time in weeks, I felt light. Mark woke up early, buzzing with nervous energy. He kissed me goodbye, promising a new life for us by sunset. He didn't know how right he was. As soon as his car left the driveway, I didn't go to the spa. I put on my best power suit, a sharp, midnight blue that felt like armor. I did my makeup with precision. I looked like a woman who was ready to lead a board meeting, not a woman whose marriage was about to end. I drove to the hotel where the meeting was being held. I didn't go inside the main hall. I went to the control booth in the back, where I had a friend, another person Mark had stepped on over the years to get ahead. You ready? He asked me, his hand over the play button on the digital board. Ready, I said. Let's show them the real Mark. The ballroom was packed. Hundreds of shareholders, journalists, and employees sat in rows of velvet chairs. At the front, on a raised stage, sat the board of directors. In the center was my father, looking frail, and next to him was Mark, looking like the king of the world. I stood in the shadows at the back of the room, my heart racing. Mark stood up to give the opening presentation. He was at his most charming. He spoke about synergy, future growth, and unprecedented value. He had the audience in the palm of his hand. And now, Mark said, his voice booming through the speakers, I'd like to show you exactly how this merger will transform our future. This presentation outlines the final steps of our integration plan. He clicked the remote in his hand. The lights dimmed. The giant screen behind him flickered. But instead of a graph showing projected profits, a giant photo of Mark and Elena appeared. They were on a beach, laughing, with the little boy between them. The room went silent. A confused murmur started to ripple through the crowd. Mark froze. He clicked the remote again, frantically. Excuse me, we seem to be having a technical glitch, he stammered, his face turning a bright, panicked red. But the glitch continued. The photo changed to a bank statement. A red circle highlighted the transfers from my father's company to the Shell Corporation. Then, a voice filled the room. It was Mark's voice, a recording Leo had pulled from his car's Bluetooth system. Don't worry, Elena, the recorded voice said. The old man doesn't suspect a thing. Sarah is too busy playing housewife to notice the accounts are draining. Once the merger is signed, the Marcus Thorne identity goes active, and we're gone. They'll be left holding the bag for the embezzlement, and we'll be in Singapore before the first audit is even finished. The silence in the room was now absolute. It was the kind of silence that precedes a storm. Mark was pressing every button on the remote, then lunged for the laptop on the podium. But the system was locked. He tried to pull the cables out, but they were secured. He was trapped on that stage, with his own words and his own crimes projected 20 feet high for everyone to see. I stepped out of the shadows and walked slowly down the center aisle. Every eye in the room turned to me. Mark saw me. For a split second, the mask fell away completely. I saw the fear in his eyes, the raw, naked terror of a predator who has suddenly become the prey. Sarah, he yelled, his voice cracking. Sarah, what is this? Turn it off. It's a prank, it's a deep fake. Someone is trying to ruin us. I stopped at the front of the stage and looked up at him. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I spoke in a clear, calm voice that carried to the back of the hall. It's not a prank, Mark. And it's not us they're ruining. It's just you. I turned to the audience. My name is Sarah Miller. My husband, the man you know as Mark, has been systematically stealing from this company for 5 years. He has been leading a double life, using a false identity to defraud investors and destroy his own family. The evidence you see on the screen has already been sent to the SEC and the district attorney's office. The room erupted. Journalists started snapping photos. Shareholders were shouting. My father stood up, his face filled with a mixture of shock and realization. He looked at Mark, then at me, and he slowly sat back down, nodding. Mark tried to run. He jumped off the side of the stage, heading for the service exit. But I had expected that. As he pushed open the heavy doors, he didn't find the alleyway. He found 4 police officers and 2 federal agents. Mark Miller? Also known as Marcus Thorne, one of the agents said. You're under arrest for grand larceny, wire fraud, and identity theft. The silence in the room was now absolute. It was the kind of silence that precedes a storm. Mark was pressing every button on the remote, then lunged for the laptop on the podium. But the system was locked. He tried to pull the cables out, but they were secured. He was trapped on that stage, with his own words and his own crimes projected 20 feet high for everyone to see. I stepped out of the shadows and walked slowly down the center aisle. Every eye in the room turned to me. Mark saw me. For a split second, the mask fell away completely. I saw the fear in his eyes, the raw, naked terror of a predator who has suddenly become the prey. Sarah, he yelled, his voice cracking. Sarah, what is this? Turn it off. It's a prank, it's a deep fake. Someone is trying to ruin us. I stopped at the front of the stage and looked up at him. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I spoke in a clear, calm voice that carried to the back of the hall. It's not a prank, Mark. And it's not us they're ruining. It's just you. I turned to the audience. My name is Sarah Miller. My husband, the man you know as Mark, has been systematically stealing from this company for 5 years. He has been leading a double life, using a false identity to defraud investors and destroy his own family. The evidence you see on the screen has already been sent to the SEC and the district attorney's office. The room erupted. Journalists started snapping photos. Shareholders were shouting. My father stood up, his face filled with a mixture of shock and realization. He looked at Mark, then at me, and he slowly sat back down, nodding. Mark tried to run. He jumped off the side of the stage, heading for the service exit. But I had expected that. As he pushed open the heavy doors, he didn't find the alleyway. He found 4 police officers and 2 federal agents. Mark Miller? Also known as Marcus Thorne, one of the agents said. You're under arrest for grand larceny, wire fraud, and identity theft. They tackled him to the ground right there in the hallway. I watched as they clicked the handcuffs onto the wrists that had once held my hands. I watched as they led him away, his expensive suit rumpled, his hair a mess, his dignity gone. He looked back at me one last time. He didn't look like a king anymore. He looked like a small, broken man who had finally run out of lies. The aftermath was a whirlwind. The merger was immediately halted. My father's company went through a grueling audit, but because I had provided the roadmap of Mark's theft, they were able to recover nearly 80% of the stolen funds from the offshore accounts. The other woman, Elena, contacted me a week later. She was devastated. She had no idea. She was just another victim in Mark's long game. We met in a quiet park, two women who had been loved by a ghost. We didn't become friends, the history was too messy for that, but we found a strange kind of peace in knowing that neither of us was the winner. We had both been used. I gave her the information she needed to protect herself and her son from the legal fallout of Mark's Marcus Thorne identity. Mark tried to reach out from jail. He sent letters filled with apologies, then threats, then more apologies. He tried to claim that he did it for us, that he wanted to give me a life of luxury. I never answered. I never visited. I didn't even go to the trial. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. He was sentenced to 15 years in a federal facility. I sold the big house. I sold the expensive furniture and the jewelry he'd bought me with stolen money. I moved into a small apartment in the city, close to my father. People ask me if I regret it. If I hadn't wished, I'd never have found out. And my answer is always the same: no. Living a beautiful lie is still living a lie. I would rather be alone and standing in the truth than be happy in a house of cards. I spent 10 years building a life for a man who didn't exist. Now, I'm finally building a life for myself. I've gone back to school to get my MBA. I'm helping my father rebuild the company, not as a supportive wife, but as a partner. The betrayal was a fire that burned everything I knew to the ground. But fire also clears the way for new growth. I am stronger now. I am sharper. And I know that trust isn't something you give away for free, it's something that must be earned every single day. So, why am I telling you this? I'm telling you because there are marks everywhere. They are the people who use your kindness as a weakness. They are the ones who think they can build their success on your sacrifice. If you feel in your gut that something is wrong, listen to it. Don't let love or history blind you to the truth. You are not crazy for questioning things that don't add up. You are not disloyal for protecting yourself. Betrayal is a deep wound, but it doesn't have to be the end of your story. You can take that pain and turn it into a weapon. You can take that heartbreak and turn it into a foundation. Mark thought he was taking everything from me. He thought he was leaving me with nothing. But what he actually did was set me free. He took away the fake life so I could finally find the real one. The best revenge isn't just exposing the truth. The best revenge is moving on and becoming someone they can no longer reach. He's behind bars now, living a life of gray walls and iron bars. And me? I'm standing in the sunlight, finally breathing air that isn't poisoned by lies. He broke my trust. He stole my time. But he couldn't break my spirit. And in the end, that was the one thing he couldn't account for in his spreadsheets. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever dealt with a betrayal like this, know that you're not alone. The truth might hurt, but it's the only thing that can truly set you free. Take care of yourselves. And remember, watch the shadows, because that's where the truth usually hides.